Okay, today's class is on industrial and warehouses. So, let's start with official definition. What's a good definition of industrial properties?
Factories?
Yeah, starting with a zoning, type of warehouses available, industrial, if they're gonna be using the property for manufacturing or.
Okay, you guys got like 2 or 3 of the things, but here's the here it is all wrapped up. It is definition of land and buildings suited for production, manufacturing, assembly, warehousing, research, storage, and distribution centers. Which distribution centers are a type of warehouse, but they're a specific type. And of course, most of these, you want them to be, they ideally want to be right off the freeway, or they want to be on very main highways that are very close to freeways. They want easy access. Okay, so let's talk about something that's very important with the Inland Empire. The Inland Empire, of course, is the #1 market in the U.S. for industrial and warehouse. LA is like number 9 or 10, so we have like 2 of the top 10 in this area, so this is big business. So let's start with supply chain. How do you think everything with this starts? What starts it all?
Well, usually it's always supply and demand, depending whatever the demand is.
Okay. The beginning of all this is the ports, the ships, the container ships coming from China and from all over the world that dock at 2 of the busiest ports in the U.S., Port of LA and Long Beach. Okay, so that's the start of the logistics chain, or also called the supply chain. There's not enough land, or it would be too expensive to warehouse and do everything they need to do with that. So all of that gets offloaded from the ships, and it gets put on rail lines and on trucks, gets shipped out to the Inland Empire. Okay? And from there, that's where they assemble it, distribute it, do whatever they need to do, whatever it is, to the whole rest of the country. But it starts, that is the supply chain. It starts and it moves that way. So it has to do with rail, it has to do with trucking, it has to do with shipping, it has to do with them having the supply of land and the infrastructure already built out there, okay? And there could be everything from a bunch of bike parts that are being distributed that have to be assembled and then get sent out to all the Walmarts. It could be another one where there's like fruit and it has to be put in a cooler that's, so every single warehouse is going to have its own specifications based on the needs of what's coming in. Just one story that's, it's not totally related, but it's just something that I kind of came across that's interesting is, you ever heard of Lamps Plus? Mm-hmm. Okay, so Lamps Plus buys, have any of you heard this one about Lamps Plus? Okay, so they get 99% of everything, of course, from China. Okay, so they would have everything shipped over from China, and then they were like, yes, shipped over from China to distribute in their stores, and then they would have to pay money to ship back empty containers, okay, and that was eaten into their profits. So they got this idea and started working with some suppliers, and so then they started getting into the scrap metal. So they would buy scrap metal and put it on their empty containers and ship it. And so they started doing so well with this that some years they make almost as much profit on the scrap metal they send back over as they do on selling their lamps. Wow. Just so you know. So the shipping and the logistics things, it's something that you got to be smart about how you do, but it's like you don't want to have empty either which way. So it's like when it's got to go back to China, you send something back, you can make some money off it, or at least cut into what it cost you. Okay, so we've talked about some of the basics of a industrial property, but let's go specifically into more warehouses, because there's a lot of different kinds of things that you're not going to come across too many like factories and things around here. You know, straight up warehouse and distribution centers. That's going to be your main thing that you're going to come across. And in LA itself, they're actually turning some of the old like dark, Kmart's or Macy's or whatever. Some of those are even turning into some warehouse spots. Okay, especially for like the e-commerce. E-commerce is one of the things that's growing, and if they're centralized in cities, it's easier for them, for like an Amazon or those e-commerce sites, to get their supplies from there. Okay, so one of the basics of warehouse that's a little bit different than standard real estate is the square footage equation. Okay, so when you come across somebody that says they need, a warehouse, one of the things you got to find out is, what do they do? Okay, because a warehouse is different than a regular building. Like a regular building, you just use up the ground space. Okay, but in a warehouse, you stack up, so your footprint is much smaller than what the total square footage or volume of the structure is. So this is like a calculator that you use, and it's available online, but you ask your client, this will tell you how much square footage you need. You ask them how tall their pallets can be stacked, because some of them, they use certain pallet storage systems, and they can like stack. So this one is just an average of 22. An average pallet is 48 by 40. So if they were going to try to be 80% full most of the time, they would need at least 3,000 square feet of ground pad, because the rest, but this would also mean that they would need to have at least 20 to 25 foot ceilings, which, ceiling height and volume is something that, in warehouse that you got to look for.